Alright guys, welcome back to episode 6 of Saturday Fur Trapping Hour. Today we have a guest from Kansas on with us, so I'm going to turn over to him right quick and let him introduce himself. So, sir, could you tell us a little bit about who you are and a little bit about yourself?
I'd be glad to. My name is Schneider, and I own and operate Kansas Triathlon Products. And for many of you, you've probably seen me on Facebook or YouTube, and or even perhaps bought a lure or two from me. But it's good to be here.
So, how long have you been a trapper, Mr. Schneider?
Since 1970. I was born in '62, and started trapping muskrats out of farm ponds. A lot of guys my age kind of began that way. And I grew up in west central Illinois, kind of where a lot of guys watched the deer hunting episodes of Pike County. Well, I was the next county north of there, and they call it the Golden Triangle. But pretty much began as a water trapper, and through my life, I bounced around a lot, going in the agricultural industry, and from Virginia, North Carolina, Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri, and residing finally here in Kansas. And of course, I trapped and still do trap many different places in the United States, as well as given private instruction all across the United States. I've given it down in Texas several times as well. So, yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about your bait and lure making history. When did you first start your bait and lure making venture?
Got you. Well, you know, I'm like a lot of trappers. You know, you begin. I probably began my very first lure around '92. That was I was bouncing between a coyote gland lure and a raccoon lure. Raccoons were starting to gain a little bit of momentum on them and that type of thing. And basically, I was doing pocket sets in along rivers with those, and then I was having more success at the time with flat sets and gland lure scent post type sets in my early days of canine trapping, and so that's why I kind of gravitated more to a scent post type of an odor in there, and you know, it was a easier one for me to actually grapple down. Yeah.
All right. So, are you a snarer very much?
I do. Especially, I snare. I first cut my teeth actually using cable restraints in Missouri, and that's where I started learning about the snare, using the cable restraint. And I feel like I'm pretty good at snaring today. I think I understand the concepts. It was really first introduced to me in understanding the management of snaring. I first started out like a lot of guys. You have one trail, and you're going along a two-track, just to paint a picture. You're going along a two-track, and in the early days, I'd hang one snare and kind of move on to the next spot or whatever. And when I got with Craig O'Gorman, Craig emphasized to me when he was giving me some snaring instruction on the trap line about how he'd hang 30 snares and in this one coulee. And I said to Craig, I said, well, what's the coyote think when they see 3 dead coyotes? And Craig very quickly and snapped back and says, well, coyotes can't count to 3. So anyway, I kind of got a tickle out of that, and I've remembered that ever since. And since then, when I see a good trail, and as I was in the Dakotas at the time, is where I really got good at it. Now I'll hang about 14 trails per drainage that I'm going to set up, and you know, you just keep going to the next pinch point along the animal's travel route. And I was really, you know, we were catching about 7 coyotes a day out of 200 traps in the Dakotas, and 25 degrees. It was butt cold, and the next thing you know, we're pulling in from 10 to 14 coyotes a day, snaring. And we really got on them and stuff. So there's some times that of the year that snaring is your best choice to trap compared to trapping. You know, it's sometimes good to hang up the steel and start hanging up cable. So, yeah.
So do you prefer kill snares or cable restraints?
I prefer the kill snares. There is situations for cable restraints that's in your favor. You know, we were on a high wire fence. Well, it wasn't a high wire, but it was a goat fence. It was a sheep fence. And in that case, we were able to actually, they were no longer running sheep on it, but it was there. And instead of hooking onto the post and actually killing the coyote, we were actually hooking onto the snare or to the fence itself, and with a cable restraint. And that way the coyote was waiting for us. And a live coyote, you don't have to worry about the eagles. The eagles messing up the fur and everything like that, because you will get eagle damage and crow damage. Or it wasn't crows. What's the bigger bird? Ravens. So ravens would get on our coyotes too. That would. So I think there's room for both of them, you know. And the only thing I'll say about the cable restraints is you need to check them early as you can. You know, try to get in there as early as you can. Avoid damage to the coyote. Avoid damage to, you know, because they will chew sometimes. So yeah.
Yes, sir. I've only trapped one coyote in a snare, and it was in a cable restraint. He chewed it in half before I got there, but
yeah.
I trapped him about 2 days later.
You did what?
I trapped that coyote about 2 days later. He still had the.
Oh, you did?
Still had the snare around his neck, so.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Good deal.
So.
There's some funny stories. I know of a couple of different guys that were snaring and trapping next to each other. These guys are friends, and anyway, the one guy told me he was using bobcat snares, and he was in some really tight thickets and everything. Well, a coyote got into the bobcat, but it didn't catch him right, and he really basically overpowered this particular snare because he was using a pretty light-duty snare. But for bobcats, you can do that, you know. But this old coyote got into it, got out of it, and he got it. He didn't get it around because it was a smaller loop that he was using. It didn't get around his neck. It actually got around his top of his mouth, going over his ear, and he snapped out of it. And anyway, made it on the neighbor's property, and turned right around. And the other guy was coyote snared, and that coyote was actually went right through the trail that the other guy was using. Of course, he snared him, and he showed up the next day, and or that later on that day, and says, "Are you missing a snare?" And anyway, it was a pretty good joke amongst the boys. You know, he says, "Yeah, so yeah, it happened. You know, you don't want it to, but it happened."
Yeah, sir. So, do you prefer the 1x19 or 7x7 cable for your dispatch snares?
So there's certainly room for both of them. The 1x19, I love the speed on them. The one thing that's a little harder with some of that is actually getting. I like a lot of my snares dipped. I use the Dakota Line Ghost dip on my snares, and I like how they look. They really blend in nice. They would blend nice down in Texas and the South. Anybody who's got any kind of yellow grass in the wintertime, it's going to blend in nice. But the 1x19 works excellent to cover, and I mean, the loop just closes so fast, and I like that about it. But moonlit nights, I tend to see a little bit more avoidance on those particular snares because it will reflect a little bit. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. So, could you talk a little bit, somewhat in depth on bait and lure usage?
You bet. Yeah. package a bait and lure. I'm using my experiences anyway. From that moment on, you really don't know how the trapper is intending on using the product. I think we can all agree that as there may be 200,000 trappers in the United States or whatever it may be. That being said, we all have our own way of making our sets and using our products and different things like that. There are certain odors that do better at coming out of the ground than others, and that the same thing applies to myself and the way I design the products. I guess my recommendation to your audience is to test the product, maybe even in the early late winter, early spring. If a person's inclined to, and get a camera on them and see how the animals react to those products. To give an example, there's a lot of food lures, and Monty Dotson, I got one of his lures out of, I don't know if you guys know Monty or not, but Monty's a good trapper and everything, but he got his food, his 1080 lure that he formulated, and it's one of my best grab and die type of food odors. That being said, when you put it in a hole, it is less. It has less. It just doesn't pull out of the ground, lift out of the ground as well as say some other type of lures. So I guess what I'm saying is when I mail out these types of products and stuff, I know I try to let people know, it works best in a grab and die scenario. You put that on the at ground level and on a T-bone or something like that, what you end up with is now that odor does carry. I hope that makes sense to folks. That doesn't, because it doesn't come out of a hole, doesn't make it a bad lure. It's just the way it's designed. It doesn't have a lot of curiosities added to that type of an odor. So that takes us to the curiosity lures, and that's when you get into your castor odors. That's when you get into your skunk essences and things along that line. When you got those, you have the ability to do some pulling of an animal. Now, when I say pulling, I know that there's situations when you have that light breeze and that animal's 20 foot away and the animal picks up on the odor and that lure did its job on that level. Unfortunately, we don't always have a wind. Sometimes the wind is going out of the wrong direction and those types of things. So I always caution trappers when I do demos or whatever. I said, some of the best things you can do is still try to put yourself on top of the coyotes. I hope your audience finds that useful. But finding, not only being on a good location, but literally finding sign is vital to make your success and make you successful. When we get into, I even have a rule, generally speaking, that if I don't find sign, I'm generally going with a visible type of a set, such as a dirt hole, such as a T-bone, such as a scent a day, whatever, or a staked lull. There's a lot of different ways to attract a coyote, but if we're looking at I'll just pick out an alfalfa field or a pasture that's got good grass stand. We believe we have an area where coyotes are traveling. The problem is we can't narrow it down enough to find the sign. So when we're in those scenarios, we want to be thinking dirt holes. We want to be thinking visual. If you see a belly under near a fence line, as an example, going through the tall grass, we can try to put ourselves as close to those types of animal-made passageways, but we don't know exactly. Are we talking deer? Are we talking dog? Are we talking coyote? Right. So some of those things we don't quite have it worked out. But outside furrows of a fence line, those types of things, we can put ourselves in a good position, but sometimes we don't have the sign. So in those cases, I like going with the showy dirt hole. I like using bait in the hole, a ball lure on the back lip of the hole depending on how cold it is determines kind of which call lure I use. If it's warm out, that 40 to 55 degrees type of a scenario, then I'll go with more of a mild call lure. It's something there that they don't want to roll on. If we're talking something like with in other places where you might be talking 25 to 35 for a high for the day, now I might want to be using a skunkier call lure on the back lip of the dirt hole. So those kind of things change. And then when I come down and I do find sign, one of the most important things for me, Anthony, is if I find sign, that's probably where I'm steady. The only thing would be is if it's a 2-track road or something like that. But I think dirt holes, T-bones, grab and dies, all of these types of things that we're trying to attract the animal to, even if it's 6 inches away, we're still asking the coyote to make a decision to work it, whether they want to work it or not. I think those are things for a trapper to consider. And if you found sign, well, I think it's best if you could just put a trap underneath of his foot. I hope that makes sense to you in the audience, but that's where your scent posts, your gland lures, your low-key type of odors. Even if the coyote doesn't smell the odor, let's just say for whatever reason that you got a 15-inch rain and the wind's blowing out the wrong direction, even though the scent's only 8 inches away from the coyote's foot. The fact is the coyote's actually walking on top of your trap to begin with. So we still have a 1 in 4 chance we'll catch the coyote anyway, just him walking there. So, but the gland lures, what's nice is every animal, whether it's a bobcat, a fisher, a mountain lion, or a coyote, they're all interested in who's in the neighborhood. And so that's kind of my strategy. If I find sign, I'll set the sign, go with the urine post or gland lure type of a set, a trail set, a mafia set. All of those, those are the way I like to trap. And then actually my catch percentage to me that's a dead coyote. That coyote, we're going to get him because he's walking on my trap anyway. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Like what you said at the beginning, once you ship out your bait and lure, you don't know how they're going to be using it. And I just wanted to tell our audience that it's kind of hard to go by ratings. Like if you're looking at for bait and lure, if you got really bad ratings, you don't know if it just doesn't work very well for that person in that area, or if the person didn't know how to use it.
It could be a lot of things. I mean, you could even and this is not a slam on any one individual, but you know, if I was going to rate a product when I was 17 years old, just back then we didn't have that type of rating system. But if I was 17 years old, I guarantee you that a lot of fox. That's when we had a lot of red fox. I guarantee you that I didn't catch hardly any red fox. And the fact is I didn't understand, number one, anything about the fox when I got down to it. And they would say put 3 drops of the lure at a set. They wouldn't tell you what kind of set, and of course you certainly don't know the exact area to place it. So I would have given a lot of 1-star ratings because I didn't catch nothing. But the fact is in my own case, I didn't really know how to trap. So I did mention about a food odor down in a hole that didn't have a lot of lift. There is a way that we can make that set still work for us, and one of those methods there is if I was going to put the money is the positive attraction down in the hole. In my case, the food odor, that nice 1080 look. I know the coyotes are going to want to eat it. That part I don't have a problem with. The problem is, of course, them finding that lure, right? I mean, that's my issue. So what I would do is make a second hole or a second punch hole, and there I would put more of my skunkier lure, my Final Destination, my Oklahoma Suicide, those types of products. I would actually put that in a hole right next to it, more or less, or however your set is. Now I have lift. Now the coyote comes over to investigate the curiosity that I fed him, and then the food odor will hold their attention. And I think, guys, all of us different lure manufacturers, we have different odors and scents, but the principle remains the same. A food has a lot of appeal, but a low, not necessarily a long call to it. Whereas a long call has a lot of appeal, but it doesn't hold the attention, because castor and skunk essence is interesting as an example, but it doesn't necessarily hold their attention because they can't eat it. I hope that makes sense. So you can use them in combination to where now you have the odor to attract them, and you have the food to keep them occupied and dancing around until they get caught.
Yes, sir. So, what do you carry for equipment-wise on your canine line?
So I only have the one set of tools. I don't have a remake set and a new set. The typical trapper's hammer, your shovel. I actually carry a spade with me because I do some very deep dirt hole sets, and I do very good big hole sets and things like that. My steel sifter, which has about a 1/4 by 5/8 inch opening. What else do I carry? I'm using landscape fabric as my pan covers nowadays. The way I do, you can go to a yard sale and find somebody that's selling their landscape fabric at a reduced price, or it's readily acceptable or available to people. I cut that. I'm using number 3 size trap, and I'm cutting, which gives you about a 6.5 inch jaw spread, 6 1/4. And so I'm cutting it widthwise 4.5 inches, and I'm cutting it lengthwise by 7.5. So that way it lays underneath my jaw, and that way there is no dirt that gets underneath of my pan. But before I can ever do any of that, I actually cut while it's still in the roll form, I cut it 4.5 inches wide, and let's say it's a 30-foot roll. Well, I'll cut all of my 4.5 inches on each of the on the roll. Then I take it out into my hay field, my pasture out here, and I tie it onto the barbed wire fence, and I actually let it sit out there for about 2 to 3 weeks. That allows a lot of the dye odors that's in the landscape fabric to dissipate. And so I let it sit out there for 2 or 3 weeks, and let the dew hit it, let the rain hit it, let the sunshine and the air hit it. And once I started doing that now you have a weathered, clean piece of material, and that's worked pretty good for me, and it's cheap. That's the big thing. It's cheap. So yeah, I can cut the 7.5 inches out really quick after that. So
yes, sir. So how do you what kind of tote do you use to carry the stuff around in?
Oh, I got my trapper's bag, and but I do a lot of just 5-gallon buckets, to be honest with you anymore. It can hold my driver and my bag and stuff like that. And then on the side, I have a canvas bag that I carry my lure in, my sheep's wool, and generally when I go on a trap line, I carry 2 baits. I got 2 baits, 2 call lures, 2 food lures, and 2 gland lures. And that way, yeah, if I believe I understand what travel way the animals are using, I will change it up from one set to the next. You follow what I'm saying there? So that way, number one, if he avoided this particular odor, now I have another odor he may be interested in, so, yeah.
Yes, sir. So, how do you freeze-proof your sets?
So, there's a couple different ways. Now, understand that I am a lure maker, bait maker, and there's nothing I can do on my property, probably, that I can really keep my wax dirt clean. I'll just put it that way. But I make wax is one of the best at absorbing odors in the area. And now that being said, I do make some wax dirt. I do it the solar method. I do 1 part wax to 6 parts dirt. That's kind of how I do it. And I have a black tub with a piece of plexiglass, and I will make the wax dirt. Now, I'll take whether it's sphagnum peat moss, I might use juniper duff, where I'll go out and scrape off the top needles, and then I'll go underneath and I'll actually sift out the duff. And but I'll mix 1 gallon of wax dirt to 1 gallon of this duff, and it's dry. That's important that I get it really bone dry, and so it saves me money from a wax dirt perspective, and it actually, because wax dirt, wherever I've done it, the dirt actually ends up being coal black, just about. And when I go to use it, well, it just, if you really look at it, it just stands out like a sore thumb. But when I started blending natural duff to it, well, now the wax absorbs the odors, or not the odors, but the color of the duff, and now you have a very natural looking type of a set, and it blends in very nicely on that. I think we all have some sort of dry material that's local to a person's area that you can use to blend in, but I mix that 1 to 1. So now then, I'm almost to a point now, Anthony, that when I'm getting into some really bad weather, I really like bedding my trap in a very porous type of material, and whether it's shale, coal shale, I wouldn't even mind pea gravel, any of that, because where I'm trapping a lot of times, we'll get that moisture, or we might even get a freeze, and the next thing you know it, that frost is coming up out of the ground, and it's going to freeze your trap down. And I think I do better when I have a porous type of material, such as I just mentioned. And now my trap doesn't really freeze to the ground. You have objects that are a little bit more friendly. I'll cover it with my dirt, and my wax dirt or dry dirt or whatever I'm doing. But underneath the trap, I really like having a material that isn't like concrete, if you follow what I mean, when it will freeze and thaw, and that type of thing. So if a guy is doing flat sets, I think a guy's almost better off to have a ton of dry dirt to cover the trap up, and maybe a porous material underneath. And for me, I want to stay away from the wax dirt, because now you got whatever odor's in the wax dirt is going to be with that coyote. He's going to smell it quick, and you're going to get. That's when I get the most amount of scratches, uncovering. I don't really get flip traps so much, but the coyotes seem to mess with the set. They don't really get caught. If I have a step down type of a dirt hole, on the other hand, now I use the wax dirt with confidence in those. I guess it's because the trap is about 3 inches down to begin with, that you just don't get the scratching and stuff. And the coyote seems to be more interested in the food that he's potentially getting. So, yeah. Last resort is using calcium chloride or salt. And I have been in some places that there was just nothing you could do to make it work, to salt that underneath your trap and stuff. So, yeah, that's the last resort on that. But sometimes you got to do that just so your trap will fire. So, yeah.
Yeah, sir. So we're kind of running out of time here, so we better shut off right here. So, is there any statement you'd like to say before we leave here?
no, I just appreciate the opportunity to visit with you, and I hope everyone has a good trapping season this year.
Yes, sir. And to our viewers, you'll need to go check out Mr. Ed Schneider's YouTube channel. He's got a lot of good instructional videos on there. A couple I liked was his video on bait and lure usage and on avoidance and refusal. So, check that out, and thank you for being on with us today, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you very much, Anthony.